Hey, welcome to Not Decentralized Revolution, as is normal, and where Dan McKnight has been a guest before. We're doing at least, I think, three, maybe more live streams in advance of the Libertarian National Convention coming up on Memorial Day weekend. Business starts on Friday morning, but there's the Bitcoin Bash that Mises Caucus is a co-sponsor of on Thursday. And one of the events that I'm looking most forward to is Rage Against the War Machine 3.0. And our good friend Tim Miller is one of the organizers of that. He was gracious enough to get two really great guests tonight to talk about Rage Against the War Machine, what's going on, current events, and what we as small L libertarians, people who love peace, political activists, what we can do about it. So Nate Thurston is with me. We're going to talk. They've got about 45 minutes. So we're going to get right into it. Dan, I apologize for what happened a month ago. We had technical difficulties, couldn't have you on. I'm glad to have you back on. How are you doing?
Good. It's great to be here. No worries about the last time that happens. When we're on this side of the equation, there's always something working against us, right?
That's right. We were talking that maybe there was we'll flatter ourselves by thinking somebody had something to do with that. Yeah. Okay. But it's a real pleasure. I've never gotten to talk to our other guest. I've read a lot about him, heard a lot about him, listened to him on other podcasts. You've had a very eventful couple of months in your life. It's a pleasure to have you on. Joe Kent, how are you?
Doing well. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's good. Joe, let's start with you. How were you approached to be part of Rage Against the War Machine, and what do you want to help us accomplish at that?
So actually had a lot of friends that I think were in the DC Rage Against the War Machine rally. And then Tim reached out to me directly and I said, yeah, absolutely. So what I want to accomplish is really just keeping this very, very central issue front and center. And I think this is a place where, MAGA, even some newer Republicans, libertarians, and even some of our friends on the left have a lot of common ground where we don't want to be involved in any more Middle Eastern wars. We understand the ramifications of this one in particular could be even more catastrophic, and to let all of our leaders know that we don't support this. And while President Trump actually has a little bit of opportunity to take that opportunity and hopefully get us out of the war as soon as possible. So that's my goal. I'm really glad you guys are putting this on.
Okay. Well, yeah. And it's a real honor to have you be a part of this. And I use the word honor on purpose because one thing I've been thinking a lot about our country and how things seem to go these days. Like, I was a Reagan baby. I remember like politicians used to have like some form of like shame and stuff like that. At least they paid lip service to it. And it doesn't happen very often where somebody resigns something for principled reasons and not just to run for office or because they got pressured, because they really messed up and they're trying to avoid prosecution. So like to do what you did takes guts, A, knowing what was going to come your way, but B, in the back of your head must have been like, oh, well, what if I stay here? Maybe I can make things a little better. So I think a lot of people with good hearts stay on and try to do that. What went into that calculation for you, and how do you feel about that decision now?
I'm still, I guess, happy with the decision that I made. My calculus basically was I was going to attempt to influence things as much as I possibly could while I was in. And we kind of had a big run through last year in the lead up to the 12-day war, where there was a lot of pressure on the president. We were having a series of deputies committee meetings. There was a National Security Council process where we were presenting different views of why we should not get into this conflict, trying to lay out very clearly what the Israelis' aims were. Thought we kind of arrived at a good place. Quite a few of us on the inside were against the bombing of the nuclear facilities, but we kind of lost that argument. The promise at the time was he's just going to bomb these nuclear facilities and then we'll be done, because this basically takes the enrichment, and we can get into this later, but this takes the enrichment issue kind of off the table if we just destroy it. okay, not ideal, but fine. I can be behind that. I understand the logic at least. However, quite a few of us said at the time that, just after dealing with the Israelis, that they weren't going to be satisfied with that. That they were very clear their goal was regime change, and so I saw the circle around the president really shrink after Midnight Hammer, and he wasn't getting the accurate information that he needed, and he was being surrounded in an echo chamber that I described in my resignation letter. And then once the war kicked off, I didn't resign right away. I stayed in for almost a little bit over 2 weeks, and we spent, almost back to back. The first couple of days, quite a few of us didn't go home, and we were trying to come up with courses of action where the president could say, okay, we accomplished X objective. We bombed X amount of military hardware, and now we're going to get back to the negotiating table, trying to give him off ramps. But again, that echo chamber around him was still really insulating him from a lot of the ground truth. And so for me, I personally felt like, okay, I can stay in and lie to myself that I can make a difference from where I am. But the information that I was able to, get to the president was extremely limited. Even to get it to key decision makers was limited at the time. I know others in the administration, they still feel like they can kind of chip away at it. I just felt like we had basically kind of run our course, and the most effective thing that I could do was call attention to the fact that the Israelis had pressured us into the war, but then also from a personal level, just me, who I am and how much time I spent overseas fighting in the war. I had told myself 20 plus years ago that if I was ever in a position and I could prevent us from getting sucked into another quagmire, that I would do so. I was really frustrated as a young, E6, E7 staff sergeant in the Army that we had been led into Iraq, and there was people that knew better that were in positions of power, and none of them spoke out. And so just morally, especially when the body bags started coming into Dover, I just said, I can't be a part of this. I have to leave.
Yeah.
So do you think are there a lot of people in the administration still, a decent amount, I hope, that maybe have the same feelings as you, but have decided to stay in and see if they can make any changes or at least do their job better so someone else doesn't come in and just add to that echo chamber?
Certainly. Yeah. There's a lot of good folks in the administration right now that are trying. And, I talk to some of them every now and again. It's hard for some of them to talk to me because there's, it's everything's political now. And I'm not a person you're supposed to talk to if you're still, in MAGA world. But yeah, there are a lot of good folks there who probably think a lot of the same things that we do, who are saying to themselves, like, I got to stay on because I can make a difference from where I'm at. And I totally understand that. It is a calculus. It's something that it was probably the biggest toss up for me was like, do I stay here and try and affect it, or do I leave?
Yeah. You've mentioned the term MAGA a couple of times, and I want to get back to that, but I want to bring Dan in. Dan, you've been doing so much great work. Like the concept of Defend the Guard is so great. It's a long battle. We're having some victories, and we're going to keep pushing it. The Mises Caucus is always going to be on board with what you guys are doing, but with part of what you're doing, you talk to guys who are probably active duty, recently retired, in all kinds of positions all across the country. I know you've got a network and people are helping you. What are you hearing about all the stuff Joe has been talking about, and what are people that you talk to, what are they saying about the importance of what Joe's message is about Iran?
No, I appreciate that, and thanks for having me on, and it's good to see all of you. Yes, the overall consensus, I think, is kind of, if you were to take the Thomas Massey polling crosstabs and look at how he's doing in his own election, you could take those same demographics and apply them to how people perceive Joe Kent, that anybody under 65 that has lived their entire adult life in this state of unconditional and unprovoked and undeclared wars is openly opposed to the war in Iran. They question everything about it, the intelligence, the mission, the purpose, the changing direction, the communication, the definitions of success. And then anybody over 65 that turns on Sean Hannity at the end of the night is 1,000% calling Joe Kent a traitor like Trump does. The demographics kind of speak for themselves, that those that are that fought in the global war on terror in our age demographics, we've seen enough of it. We're done with it. We want a nation that is focused on America first, truly America first, that if we do have to go to war, if we do have to protect our own interests overseas, that we do it with a proper authority, with a debate, with a discussion, where we can hold our representatives accountable. And so whether it's veteran, active duty, or non-military personnel, the opinions are kind of the same. It's based on that split in age. Once you get over 65, it's whatever Sean Hannity says and Mark Levin says that that demographic tends to believe. And you can see it in the Thomas Massey polling numbers. I've never seen it more clear in my life.
Yeah. We got a comment from Josiah, who is the chair of the LP here in Tennessee, Mises Caucus board member. I'll read it for those of you who are listening and not seeing it. And I'll let Joe answer and then Dan. With what we see in the polls broken down by age group, are you hopeful or doubtful with the younger generations being America first and non-interventionists? So like, what's the outlook here?
I'm hopeful because I think that younger generation, they believe that we shouldn't be involved in these wars. What gives me some pause and where I am concerned is that they will become so disillusioned with the political process altogether that they're like, I'm not going to even bother with it. I'm not even going to bother voting. That's why I think Massey's primary is so important. If Massey gets taken out, I think a lot of these guys who agree with Massey, who are in that younger demographic, they're going to stop participating. That's my fear. So as long as we can keep those guys engaged, that younger generation engaged, I actually think we'll be in a really good spot going forward with, especially with this issue.
So what does the term MAGA mean to you? Or maybe let me ask it this way. What did it mean to you 2-3 years ago versus now? What has Iran done to that concept? Yeah,
I mean, 2-3 years ago, it meant everything that President Trump ran on and won. I mean, he won the popular vote. He won the Electoral College. The three pillars of MAGA, as I understood it, was, secure border, tight immigration policy, and then trade, obviously putting American manufacturing and American jobs first. And then the third key core pillar that he really, I think, probably did the most heavy lifting on was no intervention. He ran on not starting any new wars. He did that in his first administration. It didn't go perfectly in his first administration, but he didn't get us into any new wars. And he was one of the first politicians of any prominence other than Ron Paul that I heard call out the Republican war machine. In South Carolina, he calls out the Bush family and just talks about how big of a waste Iraq was. And that brought me to Donald Trump at the time. And so that's what MAGA meant to me. And I would be willing to bet a lot of money on that's what MAGA meant to the vast majority of Americans who voted for him. Now MAGA, according to President Trump, it's whatever he says that it is. And there's a lot of people in that, I think, older age demographic, or just the people who are getting paid to parrot that talking point, that are just like, yeah, now it's kind of whatever the boss says. And let's not think too much about going back on all these different campaign promises, where the overwhelming majority of people who voted for Trump are like, whoa, wait a sec, man. Like, why does my gas cost $5-6? Why aren't we releasing the Epstein files? Why did we start this new war? The MAGA issues. So there's a lot of bitter people out there right now. And so I think if we need to start trying to keep the coalition together, and probably build new coalitions, because I am afraid, again, that's a disenfranchised thing too. I think a lot of people who didn't vote before, who voted in 24 because they viewed the situation to be so dire and President Trump to be such a change agent, that now they're just going to be like, well, screw it. I don't even want to hear it. I don't want to vote.
Right. And that's what we're trying to do, to make the LP a place not where it's been for the last 50 years, which is kind of the civics class debating society, or the left-wing cultural libertarians, but to make it a home for Ron Paul people, Thomas Massey people, America first, non-interventionists, MAGA people, and Bitcoin people. And I think that if we do that, if we have a good showing this coming Memorial Day weekend in Grand Rapids, if these rallies get some more coverage, and that's our plan as a Mises Caucus, is to try to get that going into 2028. So we have a presidential candidate, a ticket, who represents those things: MAGA, Bitcoin, anti-Federal Reserve, non-interventionists, and do the kingmaker strategy. Like, hey, we're going to run hard in these states unless, JD Vance, Vivek, Marco, whoever, unless you promise to do X, Y, and Z, that to try to use asymmetric warfare. That's what we're trying to do. And I hope it works. I hope that I hope Massey wins, and that, those people don't get disillusioned and they get involved and they help us do that. Because I think that's, with new media, the way things are going, that is a thing that could possibly work. Unlike, just running a former Republican governor and hoping to get 2%.
I just want to mention something so important with a guy like Massey winning and the context of us talking about this war, mentioning that younger generation, you look at the crosstabs, you can see people not happy about this war at all. They want America first. Dan, I think you can probably expand on this pretty well, but we've got an answer for this, which is the U.S. Constitution, and the people in Congress are supposed to do their job. And we've talked about how Israel got us into this war and all that. And if they were doing their job, we wouldn't have to worry about another country getting us into these wars because we wouldn't be able to. The person would, I don't know, get their hand slapped, or there would be a war powers vote, or something would happen. But they've just sort of stopped doing that. I think probably because they're all okay with it. But that's what I hope the people understand, is that you do have a voice, and that your representatives in Congress, and you're unhappy about this, and they do have checks and balances and are supposed to be able to stop this. Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I couldn't agree more. And in fact, I'm going to drop a name here that might make most of the people in the audience on this show fall out of their chairs. But a Republican primary candidate for the governor of New Hampshire, Scott Brown, former Senator Scott Brown, former neocon war hawk Scott Brown, in his campaign yesterday against John Sununu, put out an official message that if elected, excuse me, he's not going for governor, he's going for Senate, that if elected into the Senate, he would immediately call for a declaration of war the first day he's there. Where have we heard that before? No one in modern history has said that they would do that and oppose the president, and he's running on a Republican platform. I think that the coalition, the MAGA coalition that you guys have talked about so far, is so fractured that the different pieces are scrambling, looking for a home right now. And when somebody like Scott Brown is willing to go out and say that I would lean on the Constitution as a way to rein this back in, that shows you that the coalition still has steam. But like Joe said earlier, if we don't have something to rally around, if we don't have that exciting figure, that moment in time, that remnant will scatter again. And it took so much effort to get the remnant to come together in 2024 to get Trump reelected. You look at the coalition that was built with the Mises Caucus, the Libertarian Party, the anti-war conservatives, the Republican veterans, the MAGA crowd, all of them coming together, and all of them have kind of had their backs stabbed a little bit by the administration. And it doesn't matter whether you're like Joe, who was outspoken against the war, but very principled and respectful towards President Trump, or if you were Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was kind of bombastic in her criticism of President Trump, or if you were Thomas Massey, who was just silently principled and never said a word about the man. It doesn't matter. All three were deemed traitors not because they did anything against their country, but because they opposed the man. And that's why the cult of personality of MAGA is not nearly as important as America First. You know, you look at the America First movement that started with Bob Taft, and it came all the way up through Ronald Reagan, and then President Trump kind of picked it up. America First is what it was supposed to be about. MAGA was a byproduct. It was a piece of America First. Yep. And it's been turned into this cult of personality. And if we don't have something to rally around, some central figure, some principle, like the Constitution, and somebody to carry that banner, that remnant will be lost again. And it's our job to keep that remnant close, because they are just bumping along as best they can, kind of like a lost candle in the night.
Yeah. Activating the remnant, the people who already believe in those things you just talked about, is much easier than trying to convince, everyday Americans who don't pay much attention to politics to get them energized or whatever. We're not going to get 50% plus one to win a presidential election, which is the current chair of the LP. They have this project that, we're going to be parity with Democrats and Republicans in 10 years. That's absolute, utter foolishness. We have to look at things, how they actually are on the ground, and try to use the advantages we do have. And our biggest advantage is that remnant of people who are waking up and saying, hey, maybe the empire thing is not what we should be doing here. So
that's right. And that's why I think it's so important. And finding me agreeing with Scott Brown on anything is been impossible until recently. But the fact, I've had quite a few conversations with him and his team about this.
That's
great.
I
said, you need to appeal to the MAGA crowd that has been disenfranchised, that doesn't want a John Sununu representing them. Something that's just more of the same. If you want to get that 1.5 to 3% that can make the difference between you and Sununu, or you and Pappas, you need to talk to the anti-war crowd, and you don't even have to be anti-war. Just be pro-constitutional war. Just be just war. And if you do that, they will come to your aid.
Right. And so you talked about like the cult of personality of what, the influencers, a lot of the paid influencers on X and things like that, who are have that the party line is now, well, MAGA is whatever we say it is. So I hate to go down this road, but like, how did that happen? Who, like, in any administration, there's always the question of who has access to the president, who is the last person who's in the president's ear. It happened with Reagan, all this stuff. So like, what happened? I don't think Trump gave up on the things he said he believed in, because he's an interesting guy, but he had a long track record of speaking out against intervention, particularly on Iran. And so what happened? Who did this? Who switched the streams here? Joe?
Yeah, and I'll even go one further. Like in his first administration, again, it wasn't a perfect policy, but the max pressure campaign was working. I mean, Trump did a very good job, I think, of using targeted, decisive military action where needed that basically got the Iranians' attention when he killed Qasem Soleimani, which I know a lot of my libertarian friends are like, don't do that. That was bad. But he got the Iranians' attention, and then the max pressure sanctions. The Iranians were willing to talk with President Trump. And so actually his strategy was working. And so for me, I've tried to wrap my head around like, Trump's a smart guy, and he did have a track record before that was incredibly pragmatic, and it was actually working on this issue. What happened, and I had a front row seat for a lot of it, in literally watching the Israelis through their influencers, but then also just the access that we, the U.S. government, have given the Israeli officials, which is not like any other. It's not like a relationship we have with any other government. And I've done a lot with the Five Eyes over the course of my career in the military and in the CIA, and the way that the Israelis were able to come in and have direct engagements consistently and bypass a lot of the intelligence cycle that normally takes place. That's incredibly unique and incredibly dangerous. So that definitely affected President Trump. But I still have a hard time of just thinking it was the Israeli official government's interactions with us, and then also the echo chamber, what takes place in the media. They were very effective. The Israelis were of using their official access, and then their operatives in the American media to kind of echo the similar message at the same time. That's kind of how they moved the issue from Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, which the Iranians actually agreed with, which is why the negotiations were actually making progress, to Iran can't have any enrichment. And they use that to kind of move that talking point. But I've just still been scratching my head, and I do wonder, and I think this needs to be looked into more, just the sheer amount of breaches there were of the president's security detail over the last year. We just saw one at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. That's 4 that I can count that we know of that have been public. And then obviously Butler, West Palm Beach, those assassination attempts. What took place with Charlie Kirk, who was very vocal in his dissent from the war in Iran, who was trying to pressure the president not to go to war with Iran. I'm not saying that like 100% those things influenced President Trump, but I don't think that we can take those off the table and say that none of those things factored into the president's decision making.
Yeah, Nate, I want to give you ask a couple questions after I ask this one, but I don't want to forget this. The news the last day or so about the CIA taking documents from Tulsi. I want you to address that. Is that, I've seen conflicting reports as to what is actually going on there, but address that if you would, Joe, and also the concept of, I think we libertarians often say, well, no matter who gets elected president, they bring him in on day one, and a few men take him into a room and pull out a folder and tell him what's going on, what's really going on, what he can and can't do. So like, does that happen? Like, what's going on? Yeah. So there's a lot there. I'll let you just go. I wasn't
high enough to know if that happens, but to some degree that that does happen. I mean, the president gets intelligence briefings. I think a president who's not familiar with like how intel works and not having key advisors around him to understand that as well is a detriment, because you need to know like how to ask the right questions. A lot of getting information from the IC, literally, as Simon says, if you don't ask the question exactly the right way, they might know what you're getting at, but they won't give it to you. That's just the way the deep state rolls. In terms of the DNI CIA raid, I mean, there was no raid. Obviously, the CIA didn't send a bunch of guys down there to like forcefully seize documents. This isn't really commonly known, but if you look up like how DNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, was created, it was created in the wake of 9/11. It was designed basically to oversee and coordinate all elements of the IC. And so this gives the DNI oversight of the CIA technically, but because they stood the thing up really, really quickly, all the architecture, everything from like the actual facilities to the computers and pretty much everything that DNI uses, all the folks that work at ODNI, myself at NCTC previously, it's owned by the CIA. The CIA physically controls it. So when President Trump said, let's declassify these documents, DNI Gabbard created a team that went and grabbed all the documents to declassify, and they were storing them in a secure government facility, which was controlled by the CIA. Now, the CIA wasn't supposed to go like take the documents that they took necessarily, but they did. And so it wasn't like some dramatic raid. They literally just moved them from one building they controlled into another building they controlled that the people working for the DNI no longer really had access to. But it does speak to a bigger issue of like the CIA and the FBI too, and a lot of the IC, NSA, I'd put them in the same category. They truly, institutionally, they're not used to anybody actually exerting any oversight over them. And so they're very, very resistant to anyone exerting oversight. When President Trump came in and he said, I'm going to start declassifying all these different things, there was a lot of institutional hesitation. And the CIA just said, no, the president might be able to say that, but we're going to be the ones that are the final release authority. We have the originator control over this. And so the president can say it all day long, but we're going to control what gets released. And that obviously is problematic in a free society. If even if the one guy that all the people agreed should be in charge can't declassify these documents.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that we make use of, say, the last 10, 15 minutes that we have here. And I want to get both your guys' take on how this war is going. Is it going how you imagined, better or worse? Are we about to have a deal? Is every story about a deal made up? Is it possible that we could have one that looks anywhere close to what we could have had before the war, because there were actually negotiations happening then? So just kind of your general take on where we are and how we can get out of this.
Yeah, it's a great question. I want to back up just one second and talk about the people that are around the president. We kind of danced around this a little bit, and I want to kind of point out a real finite piece of data that there was somebody in the room in the beginning. Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff Dan Kane was the one that was reportedly on February 7th saying that this might not be a great idea to wage a war in Iran. And by the 23rd of February, he had completely changed his tune and was now supporting it and processed it, and it was now his war. And that was immediately following a visit from 3 Israeli officials who came to America to meet specifically with Dan Kane to convert him to the pro-war position. It was their military chief, Eyal Zamir. It was their intelligence chief, Shlomi Binder. And it was their Mossad director, David Barnea, that all came and met with Dan Kane and convinced him that this was going to be a good idea. So that is the people that are around the president. Even the cautious ones got converted through the private conversation in a dark room with 3 unnamed gentlemen. So I just want to put that out there because it exists and it's not talked about. But how the war is going, it's going exactly how I think most of us thought it was going to. No clear mission, no definition of success, no ability to wage a land war, carriers chased out of the strait. And now the Secretary of State saying that the only goal that we have right now is to return to the pre-war conditions the day before the war started. Open Hormuz and the mines cleared out for ships to be able to travel freely. So if our goal was to get back to where we were, I wish we had that Wayback Machine that we could travel back in time, 67 days or how long it's been, and just go back to where we were at before, with Iran having nuclear dust buried underneath a mountain and the strait open and gas prices hovering around $2 a gallon.
Amen, man. I mean, everything Dan said, 100%. The only thing I'd add in terms of can we get a deal right now? Unfortunately, the pre-war conditions, I don't think we're going to get the Iranians to go back to. We made a huge error when we let the Israelis talk us into being part of the strike that killed the supreme leader, killing the supreme leader and then continuing to kill off some of the moderates. Whenever I say moderates, a lot of people freak out. They're like, these guys aren't moderate. I'm like, well, I'm talking about by Iranian standards. I'm talking about the leadership that enforced the Ayatollah's fatwa. And again, I don't take Iranian fatwas to be very seriously because I'm not a Shia religious scholar. However, that fatwa basically made it so the Iranians didn't develop a nuclear weapon from 2003 until right now. And so those moderates were enforcing that. And they were also really observing the escalatory ladder. When today, Bradley Cooper, the admiral that's in charge of CENTCOM, he testified and he said, you know, in the last 60 months, our troops in the Middle East have been attacked like 300 times by the Iranian proxies. What he failed to mention there was that for the entirety of the Trump administration, before this last iteration, before Epic Fury began, Iran withheld those proxies and they weren't attacking our forces. They did not respect Biden at all. And so they were attacking our troops that were in Iraq and Syria, which they shouldn't have been there in the first place, but they were there. They were being attacked. The second Trump came in, the proxy attacks stopped. They didn't even kick off. They stayed when the 12-day war kicked off, they withheld their proxies. And then same thing at the end of the 12-day war, they said, okay, we're going to withhold the proxies as well. And they didn't have their proxies attack us until this last iteration began. I don't know if that will be, I don't know if we can put that genie back in the bottle, because right now the Iranians say we have control of the Straits of Hormuz. Most of the moderate leadership has been killed off, and the hardliners for a very, very long time. And this has been known. A lot of this comes out in open source reporting as well. There's been a conflict within the Iranian regime. There's been a lot of the IRGC guys who are students of Qasem Soleimani, and these guys are hardened dudes. And they've been saying for a very long time, we should develop a nuclear weapon, and we should be much more aggressive against the Americans. Now those guys are basically in charge. There's still a few moderates here and there, but they don't have anywhere near as much say in what takes place, because basically they kind of lost. They lost the argument. They said, let's negotiate with the Americans, and they gave it 2 different tries, and Iran got attacked each time. So now I don't think that we can come to a place where the Iranians are going to say, okay, we'll open up the Straits of Hormuz. We'll give that one to you guys, and we'll meet all these other concessions. The Iranians for a long time have said that going to zero enrichment is a non-starter for them. And every time I think that we can get to a deal where President Trump will come out and he'll say, the only thing I care about is Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, which is great because Iran basically has said they don't want a nuclear weapon. But that's when you see a lot of the echo chamber kick into high gear. You see the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, the think tank that really populates a lot of the media ecosystem that's funded by Israel comes in, and they start putting out all these point papers and talking points about how if there's any enrichment whatsoever, Iran will have a nuclear bomb in like 5 minutes. And then we submit our demands to the Iranians. And of course, in there we have give up your enrichment. So we keep putting poison pills into the negotiations. We keep telling the Iranians they have to surrender things, that they have to make concessions to us that we haven't been able to extract on the battlefield. So this is why I've really been advocating for President Trump, just to say, okay, there's no military solution here. And I think he can see that. Otherwise, I think he would have tried something else in these last couple of weeks. And there's no diplomatic solution. That's why he just needs to recognize that the game is rigged, walk away from the table. If he pulls our guys out, we can't be sucked in. We can walk out on our terms. Trump can use his control over the MAGA media here to say, hey, look, I won. And then we can quietly engage in diplomacy with the Iranians. The Iranians will want to come to the table because they want sanctions relief. They want to be able to sell their oil to get back on the world market. We do have a lot of play in the joints there, unless we stay in this crazy situation that we're in right now, where basically we're one lucky ballistic missile or drone strike away from being sucked back into an escalatory cycle.
That's right. We have troops all over the Middle East right now, especially in the Gulf and near the Strait, that are nothing but a tripwire. And we are one rogue drone, one errant missile, one lucky mortar strike away from being just drugged right back into this. And every American, including myself and probably Joe, would think we were justified if we had troops that were actually killed by an Iranian attack. But the reason we're in a ceasefire right now isn't because we're trying to negotiate peace. It's because all of our allies in the region, the Gulf states, we're getting the crap bombed out of them, and they asked us to make it stop. And so we had to pull back. Our carrier groups couldn't even get into the strait because the drones destroyed their effective range. We can't do an amphibious land assault. We were getting F-35s shot out of the sky. So we couldn't even defend the Gulf state partners that we promised to defend. And that's why we're in a ceasefire, is because our partners were taking huge economic and physical losses. And despite what the news is saying here in America, there is absolute catastrophic damage to American assets and allies' assets throughout the Gulf region.
Yeah, we had a question here about with all the munitions wasted on what we've been wasting them on the last few years, and now this, like, how are we set up for actual national defense if something big does happen? Like, what's your assessment of that?
Well, I do know this.
I can't say much beyond what you already read in the paper. There's already a lot that's out there. I mean, but if you just look at the sheer volume that we've sent over to Ukraine under the Biden administration, and then the sheer volume that we used during Operation Rough Rider against the Houthis at the beginning of the administration, how much we had to put in to defend Israel during the 12-day war, and then this last iteration, it's a lot. It's definitely not nothing. Our production levels probably can't keep up at this rate. That's kind of all I can say on on that topic. But again, like Iran has this advantage, and there's been a lot of like disputes back and forth. There was that New York Times article that said Iran still has like 90% of their ballistic missiles and their drones, and like I kind of think it actually doesn't matter because the geography is in Iran's favor. Like you don't need a security clearance to look at where Iran is on the map. Like Iran could literally have like 9% of their ballistics and their missiles, and they'd be able to shut down the Straits of Hormuz. So at some point, it's like we just have to sort of recognize the geographic realities of the situation. And because if we start going with like the Pentagon math, they'll come up with some math formula that says, okay, and they'll go to the president and say, okay, sir, we can produce more of X, Y, and Z munitions than the Iranians can produce of theirs. And so on this timeline, we can eventually just bomb them into submission. And the Pentagon, for some reason, as crazy as that sounds, the most common sense people, the Pentagon, for some reason, is very capable of selling that to the president. So I think it's an important issue, but I hope people don't get sidetracked on it too much.
Yeah.
I just to go back and ask about something from earlier. You mentioned the hardliners coming in after a lot of the moderate leaders were killed, and I have to imagine that they have intelligence on that we kill this person, the next person is worse than them. But I've read some big pieces. I think the Wall Street Journal did a big one, either them or Washington Post, about all these people that had come into place that were more hardliners. Almost it seems like creating the conditions where there won't just be a deal or a negotiation, where it's not possible. Do you get that read on it at all? Because as our friend Liberty Vault here in the live stream also said that if you wanted to encourage the Iranians to develop a nuclear weapon for the first time, would you do anything other than what the U.S. and Israel did by launching this war? Everyone should check out Liberty Vault on YouTube also, by the way. It doesn't look like they've been working towards or setting the preconditions for having a negotiated deal with this regime in Iran, almost like that regime is going to have to change. The entire thing might have to collapse. Is that on our part, or is that our partners and greatest ally in the war?
That's on us because we let the Israelis drive the war, and we never were honest with ourselves and said that we and the Israelis have a fundamentally different strategic goal at the end of this. The Israelis, as much as I will talk about how I don't like their influence, they've always been very upfront with us. They always said their goal was regime change or even just regime decapitation. And if Iran slips into a state of chaos, like the Israelis are fine with that. But we were not. We never said we wanted to do regime change. We never said we wanted to do regime decapitation. And so the Israelis got us on board with these strikes, especially the decapitation strike that took out the supreme leader. And I think it was because they needed our capabilities for sure, but also it was politically smart on their part because I think they knew that this war was going to drag on and they needed us on board for the entire time. And it would pretty quickly become very politically unpopular in America. But if we had no one to negotiate with, but these hardliners were going to tell us to pound sand and keep fighting, then we would be stuck in the war knowing that President Trump wouldn't want to pull out without a deal or without a decisive victory. So I think we just got outplayed by the Israelis here. And that's why I continue to advocate for us, obviously, to restrain the Israelis, but for us just to be honest with ourselves and say, like, look, the Israelis and us have an entirely different agenda. And really, we can't be partnered with somebody who has such a drastically different agenda. We certainly shouldn't be paying the vast majority of their military bills.
Yeah. I know that we don't have much time left, and I really, really appreciate both of you coming on. I'm looking forward to shaking both your hands up in Grand Rapids. I just clicked that Liberty Vault is Dave Benner, who is also going to be in Grand Rapids. So you'll hear more from Dave Benner soon, hopefully, in this space. We could go on all night, but I know that you guys both kind of have to go. So why don't you each of you give us your pitch as to, again, why people should support Rage Against the War Machine 3.0. There's three main ways you can do it. You can give money to help pay the costs of the hall. And there's some details. I think the venue might have just slightly got changed. We'll address that here after our guests leave. You can also make sure to live stream it and invite as many people as you can to live stream it. But we also want to pack the place and have as many people as possible up there in Grand Rapids. So Nate and I are going to hang around to tell you how to do that. And also you can sign up at takehumanaction.com to get our newsletter. follow Rage Against the War Machine on Twitter, follow LP Mises Caucus on Twitter, all of that stuff. So, Dan, why don't you go give your pitch for why this is important and why people should support in one or all of those three ways?
Yeah, the work that Tim and Angela did when they first created this Rage Against the War Machine concept 3 years ago. The war in Ukraine was brand new. I'm old enough to remember when that was a novel war. And we packed a large section of the reflecting pond in Washington, D.C. There was probably 15,000 people in attendance, protesters and supporters alike. And it was the greatest coalition of like-minded people on this one singular issue. We had Code Pink there, and we had Veterans Against the Wars, and we had Democrats and Republicans and libertarians, all there because we were against the war in Ukraine, and not that America was actually fighting it. It was a proxy war. 2.0, Rage Against the War Machine 2.0 last year was a little bit different mentality. It was on the eve of an election. It was in Washington, D.C. again, and the crowd was a little bit different, but it was more focused on the MAGA, America First crowd. This one is the first time we get to have a Rage Against the War Machine rally in the third consecutive year, but this one is specifically about a war that America is actually engaged in. And I think that the crowd's going to be a little bit different. Grand Rapids is not nearly as a focal point as Washington, D.C., but if you know anything about me and my organization, I'd rather fight in Grand Rapids than in the swamps of D.C. any day because it's more favorable ground. We're not stuck in the mire, and we can actually win wars in the States. And so I really appreciate that the Libertarian National Convention is in Grand Rapids. The Rage Against the War Machine rally is the next day. We have a great cast of speakers with Joe Kent and Afro Man, I hear, is going to be there. And who else did I just see that was just Scott Horton? The great Scott Horton is going to be there, one of the greatest influences in my life. And I think that it's one of the most important events that you can go to, even if you can't attend in person. You need to live stream it. And if you could chip in a few bucks, whatever Aaron and Nate tell you to go after this interview, go there and chip in a few bucks, because these events are not attracting any corporate sponsors. There is no Fortune 500 money coming to this event, I promise you. And all of the speakers, we're going there on our own dime and our own time. And I know most of us would do it every day of the week and twice on Sunday if it meant making a change in America's foreign policy.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Dan. Everybody also check out Dan on Twitter, follow what he's doing with Defend the Guard. We'll have you back on in several months or several weeks and if there's a push that you need people to make phone calls and stuff, we'll get that message out there again, too. Joe, floor is yours. You can give your pitch and tell people where they can follow what you're up to. And just go ahead.
I mean, my pitch is really simple. This war is disastrous, and the vast majority of Americans know it. That's why the vast majority of Americans supported President Trump. And so if you supported President Trump on the topic of keeping us out of these disastrous wars, we have got to have our voices heard. The only thing that really moves the needle in the White House is coverage from the media. So we've got to make this thing so big that the media can't ignore it. And when the media actually blasts this out across social media, and then even the local media covering a huge crowd size, that's going to send a message directly to President Trump and hopefully get us out of this war. And if it doesn't, we've got to keep the pressure up, and we've got to keep this coalition alive, because election cycle after election cycle, it seems like it doesn't matter who we vote for. We just get more wars in the Middle East. And so it's going to be this coalition that takes this issue across the finish line and finally gets us out of these disasters.
Yeah. And if you want to be a part of that, keeping that coalition together, takehumanaction.com, get on our mailing list, get involved with the Mises Caucus, come see us in Grand Rapids. And I can't wait to be there. I missed last convention because my boys were being born that day. So I can't wait to see everybody up there and to meet you for the first time, Joe, and to see you again, Dan. I really appreciate your time. We will, we're following what you guys do. And thanks again for coming on. Kind of on short notice too, by the way. Tim Miller got you guys connected, and I really appreciate everything he's doing. So Nate and I are going to hang around and do some housekeeping, but we'll see you guys up in Grand Rapids.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you having us on.
Okay. See you guys. You guys can just, there we go. They found their way out of the studio there. I really appreciate Joe's a pretty impressive guy. If you haven't listened to his longer form podcast interviews, I think he was on Scott Horton's show. He was on Tucker. If you kind of missed that, go back and listen to those. And I hope we're going to hear more out of him in other capacities in the coming years, because I think he's a pretty special guy. And of course, I meant everything I said too about defend the guard. It's the best thing ever. For those who don't know, it is an effort to get state legislatures to pass and the governors to sign legislation in each state that would prevent that state's governor from sending his National Guard troops overseas for military actions unless there's an actual declaration of war. So when you think about it, it's a way to use decentralization and nullification to fight the war machine. So that's a genius idea that Dan is carrying forward, and Mises Caucus continue to support that always. Up on the screen, the Twitter account, X account for Rage Against the War Machine, it's Rage Against War _. So follow that. I saw there was something, and if Tim, you're still around, I'm going to go to the page here. It looks like they may have moved it to a slightly bigger space next to the center there. What do you know about that, Nate?
I do not. I saw something about a link being incorrect earlier.
Okay, yeah, and that's the other thing. That's why I think I'm sending everybody to their Twitter page, because they will have the most up-to-date information on all of that. And the long story, the main website I think is down right now, and they have another website. Let me get in to see if Tim. Okay, here it is. Let me copy and paste, because I set, well, let me go back to this. Yeah, when I click I'm sorry, it's not, the tiny URL went away, and now I have the full link. So go to takehumanaction.com, sign up. If you're already on there, I'm going to send out an email about this rally and how you can help. The links will be correct, and they will be in there. You can also follow at LP Mises Caucus on X, and we'll continue to have that out there. We mentioned a couple of times the actual rally is Sunday, May 24th in Grand Rapids, Michigan. You don't have to be a delegate to the LNC to come to that. But if you still want to be a delegate and want to try to help out, let me put my email address up here in a second. You can email me, and we'll try to get you guys plugged in. But the main thing is there's going to be plenty to do in Grand Rapids, plenty of great libertarians to hang out with and get connected with. That's the greatest thing about the Mises Caucus, is just the culture, the great people. Ever since I got involved, of all the organizations that I've been a part of, the core leadership, the people who actually show up and do the work, the professionalism, just the character of the people who do this. I really am privileged to be a part of such a group, and you can be a part of the group too. Just come and see us in Grand Rapids. And let me put my email up here and see. Do you have any sort of final thoughts while I'm doing that?
No, I'm just I'm real happy we were able to talk to both of those guys before this event. I did decide I'm going up there as well, so I'm really looking forward to it. There's a lot of great activities planned every night, it sounds like. Yeah, that's really it. I'm excited about it.
Okay.
And I think it was a great conversation.
Yeah. So my email address is Aaron, AARON @misescaucus.com. So I know I've managed to confuse at least a couple of people with this link stuff, but email me if you have any questions about being a delegate. Watch the newsletter and watch the LP Mises Caucus X account, in addition to the Rage Against the War Machine X account for up to the minute stuff. But just get to the DeVos Center in Grand Rapids and follow the crowd of guys who look like they may be carrying a concealed weapon. Although I don't think we are allowed in certain places up there. But yeah, we have so many great people. Please show up. We're going to have another one. We're 98% sure Scott Horton is going to join us in the next few days, who's also obviously going to be at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. We're working on a couple of other people. They're working on a couple of other guests to get them there, but we can't announce right now because we haven't confirmed. Again, we don't have corporate sponsorship. Northrop Grumman is not cutting us checks. Vladimir Putin is not cutting us checks. I have still yet to see my first KGB check. All the work I've done carrying water for Vladimir Putin. But obviously, yeah, no one is helping us with this who has super deep pockets. People are coming on their own dime, and or people are sponsoring other people going into their own pockets to, hey, you can come in my room and not pay. And, all this stuff. We're both the talent, so-called talent, and the rank and file delegates. We're all going into our pockets to do this, not to mention leaving our jobs and families for a few days to do this. So please try to be a part of it if you can. And again, Tim Miller, thanks for setting this up. So another Rage Against the War Machine live stream is coming in the next few days. 98% sure that's going to happen. We're also working on one that has a slate of our endorsed candidates for the Libertarian National Committee. That's a little tougher to get together because there's literally like a dozen people. We're trying to get as many people as we can on and maybe have them on in shifts. But we want to introduce you to the people who are standing for election to do a really thankless job and a really tough job. Some of them are hardcore Mises Caucus people. Some of them are people that we are working with and we really like. So we're going to get more information about those people out, hopefully on another live stream just like this. So just watch the Twitter account, watch your email newsletter. And if you're not on for the email newsletter, go to takehumanaction.com and sign up. And again, email me anything you want, questions, Aaron@misescaucus.com. Nate, I appreciate your work, and I'm glad I get to hang out with you in person again up in Grand Rapids. So
yeah, man, it's going to be fun.
It's going to be great, and hopefully we'll be back on. I'll let you know when we're getting these other things lined up, and I might be able to be on. Nate might be able to be on. We're not sure. It's in flux, but we will let you know. And I appreciate everybody who tuned in tonight. Share this so people can not from us, but from Joe Kent and Dan McKnight, because they're two really, really important people in our movement. So with that, we'll say goodnight, and we'll see you in Grand Rapids.